Let me tell you all one thing. If I ever even thought for a moment that I could ever attempt to strangle my mum, I wouldn't be alive to tell that story. No way. If my brother didn't kill me, then my cousins would. And if that didn't happen, then my mum would kill me herself. One of her maxims was, and I quote, "I don't care how big you are, I will still slap you down." So Sean Wilson, what can I say for this truly poor excuse of a son? This brute, this cretin, was jailed for 8 years for strangling his own mother, and actually imprisoned her in her own home for 3 hours after binge drinking. But wait, it gets much worse. Sean Wilson was freed after serving 4.5 years in prison for stabbing a woman in her 40s. I bet you can guess just who that woman was. If he says that he stabbed his own mum, then you are correct. So let me just conceptualise this situation. Sean Wilson stabbed his mum in a drunken rage. He was then sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. Once he was released, he needed to be released to a home address, of course. His mum, even though he had given her nothing but heartache, agreed to let him stay with her at her home in Erith, southeast London, while he got his act together, mainly getting his own place. And just 8 days after moving in with his mum, Sean Wilson turned violent, all because that's just what people of his calibre do. They are like a virus, always blaming other people for their own circumstances and refusing to accept that they are a blight on people's tolerance. So again, just 8 days after moving in with his mum, he confronted her over his 4.5-year prison sentence, Woolwich Crown Court was told, saying it was her fault that he went to prison in the first place. He seemed to almost forget the fact that he stabbed his own mum, and that is actually a crime. Next, Wilson grabbed his mum, pushed her before grabbing her again and throwing her onto the ground. To add insult to injury, he then began to choke her with so much force that she was gasping for breath. Sean Wilson's mum was subjected to a beating. That's the only way to describe it. For an entire hour, he kept punching her and kicking her around the head and putting her in a headlock. This was a vicious assault at the hands of a person who showed extreme detriment. For a moment, let's just forget about family labels. Let's forget that this person is your mother, but they still let you stay in their house. You ought to show human decency to people that put you up. Without his mum doing him that favour, Sean Wilson would be in some drug-infested hostel or halfway house, dealing with crackheads and alcoholics and that sort of people. And what does Sean Wilson do? After using his mum as a punch bag, he then drags her into the kitchen and tells her to sit on the floor. He refuses to let his own mum leave her own home, while he continued to punch her and kick her and spit at her. It is estimated the attack lasted 3 hours. It was only when Sean Wilson fell asleep that his mum was able to sneak off and phone the police. When the police arrived at the property, Sean Wilson was quickly arrested. During his police interview, Wilson claimed he could not remember any of his violent actions towards his own mum, the person who gave birth to him and raised him, and it was claimed if violent actions took place, then it was the result of heavy drinking. In the end, Sean Wilson pleaded guilty to actual bodily harm and false imprisonment. Detective Constable Carly Walker from the Metropolitan Police South East CID says, This case shows that violence is not only restricted to partners or spouses. Domestic violence can also affect mothers, fathers, sisters and brothers. But whatever the relationship, police are determined to support victims and bring perpetrators to justice. Wilson carried out an awful attack on his own mother, and we were determined that he should be brought to justice. I'm genuinely curious. When Sean Wilson is in prison, I'm wondering, is he going to treat other prisoners the way he treated his mum? Do you reckon he would just go to a cell and start punching up people? Or will he be a coward? Anyway, good riddance. Safe.